So with Burgess Salmon regularly advising platform clients on a range of FCA regulatory matters, and given recent developments in terms of the FCA's supervision of its platform portfolio, now feels like a good time for us to be discussing how firms should be responding to some of those issues and the types of issues that we're seeing in practice. So John, why is this an important area of supervision for the FCA?
I think this is down to the key role that platforms play in the retail investment value chain, which the FCA sees as akin to a gatekeeper. Now, platforms sit towards the end of the retail distribution chain, which means they can have a real impact on retail customer outcomes. And we see this in a range of matters we advise on, whether that's terms and conditions that can be easily understood by consumers, through to firms meeting financial promotion requirements and rules around the disclosure of fees and charges, through to the protection of client money and assets. Platform firms will also have crucial relationships with other regulated firms, for example, discretionary fund managers, financial advisors, and other outsourced service providers. We regularly advise on these relationships too, for example, in relation to issues such as the FCA's rules around inducements, which can be a particularly complex area to navigate. So it's perhaps unsurprising in this context that the portfolio has remained under the FCA's supervisory lens. Now, I'm thinking here in particular of two Dear CEO letters towards the end of last year, where the FCA set out its expectations for firms within the portfolio, as well as raising some serious concerns about current conduct. Now, I wonder, Tom, if you can pick up on some of the issues from those letters that stood out to you in particular.
Yeah, sure. So one important area I think was the FCA's ongoing concerns about firms' historic failure to carry out proper due diligence on non-standard assets. Now that's led to investors holding high risk and unsuitable assets in some cases. And the FCA has been quite clear and consistent, I think, in its signalling that where firms have failed to carry out adequate due diligence, then they could be liable for losses suffered by investors as a result. As well as the investor detriment aspect, I think the FCA has also signalled concerns from a financial resources perspective. So in other words, whether firms actually have the financial resources to meet their liabilities in relation to non-standard assets. So there's also important prudential considerations for firms. I think another issue that's topical is around the retention by platform firms of cash interest amounts. And the FCA had some particularly strong wording around that in its December Dear CEO letter. John, I wonder if you could perhaps explain some more context around that.
Certainly. So this relates to the issue of what platform firms should do with interest earned on cash balances held for customers. And this has become an increasingly important area of focus in the context of the high interest rate environment we've experienced. Last year, the FCA had serious concerns about the practice of double dipping, which is where a platform firm both retains the cash interest earned and takes an account charge on the balance held. Now, following the CEO letter last year, firms should have ceased this practice altogether. Otherwise, the FCA requires firms to ensure that the arrangements represent fair value for the consumer overall, and that the arrangements are disclosed in terms and conditions and expressed clearly in other customer communications.
Yes, it was a robust intervention by the FCA, and firms had to respond and then take action, as you say, within a very compressed time period. And I think we're likely to see more of those type of interventions going forward. Given the kind of range of supervisory powers available to the FCA, it's really important that firms are staying on top of the regulatory landscape as it evolves, sometimes quite quickly, including by reference to some of the issues that we've spoken about today.